reminder of your dog.
All right, guys, we are streaming live into our Facebook page. So I wanted to introduce you guys and just talk a little bit about why we're here, and then we'll kind of get started. How's that sound? Sounds great.
Good.
Good. All right. So, hi, I'm Arnemdariz. I'm the owner and founder of Canine Learning Academy. I'm a certified dog trainer, and I met Marc, Ellis, and Maribel Vasquez quite a while ago. But last week, Marc talked about dog attacks, and it got me thinking. He's my go-to person. If I know anyone that's been injured and he specializes in dog attacks, I was like, this would be great to bring to our platform, because we have so many new dog owners, and there's a lot of new people that have rescued dogs, and they have no idea of the laws in California. So this is Marc Ellis of Ellis Law Firm. He's an attorney in California, and I'll let him do a little more of an introduction of himself in a second. This is Maribel Vasquez from State Farm Insurance. She is my agent, and she's amazing, and I asked her to come here so we can just do a Q&A and talk specifically about the California laws of dog attacks. So, Marc, just a quick introduction. Should I read off this big disclaimer that you sent me? Should I do it now, or?
Go for it. Get all the boring stuff out of the way.
Because we are talking about some legal mumbo jumbo, I'm going to have to read the disclaimer. So here it goes. The information provided on this program does not and is not intended to constitute legal advice. Instead, all information, content, and materials referred to are for general informational purposes only. Information on this program may not constitute the most up-to-date legal or other information. Viewers of this program should contact their own attorney to obtain advice with respect to any particular legal matter. No viewer of this program should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this program without first seeking legal advice from counsel in the relevant jurisdiction. Only your individual attorney can provide insurance. What is that? Insurances?
Assurances.
All right. That the information provided and your interpretation of it is applicable or appropriate to your particular situation. Use of and access to this program does not create an attorney-client relationship between the viewer and the contributing law firms or committee members and their respective employers. The viewers expressed at or through this program are those of the individual attorney in their individual capacities only, not those of their representative employers. All liable with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the content of this program are hereby expressly disclaimed. The content on this program is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. Gosh, I wouldn't have even thought I'd have to put something on there like that for a live Facebook. Is it really that important to do something like this?
It is, and I'll tell you why.
Why?
Principally.
Why don't you introduce yourself first?
All right, so I am Marc Ellis of the Ellis Law Firm. I'm a firm that's grounded here in Huntington Beach in Orange County, California, and I've been practicing law since around 2000, and I checked the things on the wall, it says 2003. So it's been 17 going on 18 years working in the personal injury field primarily. I've handled hundreds to thousands of cases, many involving animal attacks, dog bites, and things of that nature. And I've got a solid firm here with about a good half dozen folks. I've got a couple other attorneys that work for me. You throw the aggregate amount of time that we've all spent doing it, and we're well in excess of 50 plus years, but don't tell everybody that. So we've got a bundle of experience. And we've handled many a lawsuit. We are trial attorneys. We take things through the full course of litigation if necessary. And my job is to try and help out my clients and get them what's right. Today we're going to talk about the criminality of animal attacks and bites. And that is an aspect that I do not particularly, I don't cover, but I will tell you the rules regarding it, but I don't do the criminal side. That's handled by the district attorney in the area.
But you know people, right?
Well, the people that I know are not the people you'd want to know, because if you're suffering from like the criminal side of it, it means the DA is coming after you. But I got some defense attorneys that I could refer, but you'd prefer not to. Hopefully, after a little bit of education, you can figure out where that puts you.
We're getting a lot of questions, so I'm glad that you're here. I really am excited that you're here. I'm glad that you're going to be able to shed a light on California law. There is a lot of questions going on that I'm looking forward to asking you. And Maribel, just do a quick introduction about yourself.
Maribel Vasquez, State Farm Insurance, and we're local office here in Orange County as well from the Dravana agency. And we work with our customers to make sure they don't go through financial hardship due to a dog attack. So we make sure our customers have the right protection in place in case of a lawsuit.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So let me just go ahead and ask you a few questions, and we'll kind of, this is open up. There's no time limit. It's really just asking some questions. He's got some good information that I wanted you guys to kind of soak in. This will be recorded, so God forbid you have to leave. We're going to upload it to YouTube so you can take a look at it later and maybe share it with your dog walker or anybody you know that has a dog or any animal here at home. So very first question, here we go. From Rebecca, my dog is 10 pounds soaking wet, but she's a little yapper. If she startles someone and they trip and fall, am I liable? Great question.
That is a fine question. And the answer is possibly.
Good
So here's the thing. In California, if a dog bites, so if it's a 10-pound soaking wet yipper that does in fact nip me on the leg, or if it bites me, absolute, it's called strict liability. And the thing about strict liability in California is that you don't have to prove any negligence on the part of the dog owner. So I don't have to prove that you were not caring for your animal properly. If your dog bites me, you're liable. And that actually applies in your home. So if I'm a guest at, you said Rebecca, if I'm a guest at Rebecca's home and her yipper runs up on me and bites me in the leg, she will be held strictly liable in California.
What if she doesn't bite you, but she just simply comes around the corner and it startled you and you fall down her, she doesn't have stairs, but let's say you fall down and you hurt yourself so bad that you're taken off 2 weeks from work. Is it the same?
It's similar. And that was why the original was that a bite is actually dictated in California, and the strict liability has very specific aspects to it. It has to actually be, you have to own the dog, it has to actually bite, and it has to be proven. And there's some other exceptions. If I was a burglar or trespasser, then that would be an exception. But otherwise, basically, if you own a dog and it bites me, then you're going to be liable for strict liability in California.
Okay.
If your dog runs up on me and scares me and I fall backwards, you're not going to be strictly liable. But now we get into the aspect of negligence, which is actually, it's the same lawsuit. It just shifts the burden a little bit. See, in a strict liability, I don't have to prove you screwed up. But in a negligence case, I have to show that you did something wrong.
So what would you tell Rebecca, like if the scenario where the dog didn't actually put his mouth on somebody, but they fell down in her home and they got hurt, would you say something like, you need to seek some legal advice, this could get ugly? Or don't worry about it, it's not going to be a big deal?
You are going to, first and foremost, you're going to report it to your insurance carrier, because if your dog causes harm to somebody in your home, and it's whether it's a dog bite or it's just the dog running up, you're likely going to be sued. Now, you might have some defenses, but you're likely going to be sued, and you don't want to pay for that lawyer fee. And so you would defer to your insurance agent, and you would have to find out if it's even covered. So Maribel, do you know if the insurance carriers actually, do they cover dog attacks and bites?
Not every company does. With State Farm, we don't have a dog breed exclusion. So one thing that's really important is to review your current policy that you have in place. A lot of people think they cannot have the type of policy to protect yourself. But even if you're a renter, you can have a policy. And with State Farm, we do not exclude any dog breed.
So what if you don't own the home? Can you still have a policy if you're a renter?
Yes, if you have a renter, we can.
Is it different than like renter's insurance?
It's included. So the liability is included on the renter's insurance. With State Farm, we do cover every dog breed. Not every company does. So it's very important to take a look at your current policy.
So what's the average cost to like hire someone like you when something like this happens in like Rebecca's home, so that just so they have an idea, what would it cost to just seek you, like, hey, this just happened. Oh my God, what am I going to do? And you're going to say like, you're going to need 2 or 3 hours of my service. What does that kind of look like?
So my practice is in the plaintiff side. Mine would be the poor sap that was at Rebecca's house that actually fell and got injured.
Nothing, Rebecca, but who's that guy that just fell down?
That guy, he's going to come to me, and myself, and I would say probably the majority of attorneys that are in my field, you're going to get a free consultation. Certainly with me, you will absolutely get a free consultation. In the event that the injured party wishes to pursue a lawsuit, we work on a contingency without the need for any sort of, it's a non-recourse contingency, which ultimately means I only get paid if we recover.
Okay. That's kind of
So
nice.
it doesn't cost anything is the short answer.
That's good. Okay. Hopefully, Rebecca, that answered your question. So here's another question we have. Let's see. I have 3 dogs. I guess who this is. I have 3 dogs weighing in at 150 pounds each. A dog is a dog and accidents do happen. How do I protect myself if one bites someone or another dog? Those are probably 2 different questions, right?
They're absolutely. So if your dog, whether it's the 10-pounder or the 150-pounder, bites somebody, you're going to be strictly liable, notwithstanding, unless it's a trespasser, or we have had cases that we ended up pursuing because of the severity of the case, but the facts bore out that if somebody goes up and is poking the dog in the eye, and the dog bites that person,
Instigate it.
yes, and if in fact there's an instigation, that may be a defense. Now here's the thing, you're going to get sued, and then your lawyer, whether it's through your insurance company or whomever, will bring about this defense. It may prevail and you may win. You're still going to pay your lawyer, and you're going to pay your lawyer tens of thousands of dollars in order to defend and win against the guy who poked his finger in your dog's eye.
Okay.
Which leads back to what the insurance company does, which is they will tender a defense as long as your critters are on the policy. Maribel mentioned the breed exclusion, and the thing about that is that most people are aware some animals have a worse name than others, and particularly Maribel, what are the ones that they tend to dismiss in insurance companies? Do you know?
Just pit bulls? Is it the only breed that they
There's
discriminate?
many different breeds. Like I said, we don't have an exclusion, but the reason why we don't have an exclusion on a specific dog breed, any dog can bite and attack. So being a dog owner is very important to have the proper insurance.
So like
in
for
place.
this client, Wendy, she had one more question. Hopefully that answered. That was Wendy. What happens if her dog is at a groomer and her dog attacks someone there, including, well, let's just say not the groomer, because I know what you're going to say. But
Well,
if it's not the
I'll tell you
groomer-
I'll tell you what I'm going to say, just in case nobody else knows, which is that the groomer is going to fall under what's commonly known as the veterinarian's exception. And a groomer, a veterinarian, somebody who trains pets, maybe
and there's one more.
and probably a dog walker. Those are going to fall into your category. And if there's any other ones, by all means, you're welcome. Just let me know. But those are basically people. What's going to happen is you're going to have the legal province of assumption of the risk. And what that means is if you spend every day sticking your hand in a dog's mouth, you're probably going to get bit.
You're probably
Odds
good.
are.
Now, there is an exception to that. And so the
I
veterinarians
know what it
will,
is.
huh?
I think I know what it is.
What do you think it is?
I think if the dog owner doesn't disclose that the dog has bit before, then they could be liable. So if you go, oh, my dog's so friendly, yes, come on in, and then the attack happens, I would say that the dog owner was misguiding, misleading, and then I would say that that might be a reason why that's not the case. Is that true?
You're absolutely correct. And then it becomes subject to proof. So we're going to have a lawsuit. And honestly, most of the time, your groomers, your trainers, your dog walkers, they're going to probably assume that, well, this is what I do and I don't have a case. This is where they're going to need to reach out to a local attorney and figure out, you know what, this dog was just way out of control and nasty. And if the circumstances and severity of it are significant enough, a lawyer may want to look into it. You're going to look into, like you said, well, when the proof of somebody's knowledge that the dog bit becomes consequential. And it's a problem unless you hear them go, well, I mean, he never drew blood before. So things like that are what you're going to look for to say, oh, okay, so he's bitten. And that's when the exception could fly.
Have you ever hired a behaviorist as part of your legal, when you're going through a legal, what's it called? Legality with someone that has had a bike attack? Have you gone through hiring a behaviorist to see what led up to it?
So no. And here's the reason. If it's a bite, it doesn't matter. Okay. If it's a bite, I'm going to figure out how to put my phone on Do Not Disturb. If it's a bite, we don't have to worry about it because it's covered by the statute. After that, all we need to show is that the individual did not act reasonably. When we get into that second tier, when we're no longer at strict liability, but we're at a negligence lawsuit. By the way, the negligence is what applies to any animal attack that doesn't involve a bite. If it's a bite, we're going to go with the statute. If we're going to go with an attack where somebody was falling over, I think I had mentioned before, I had a client walking down the street. She's walking her dog, and she sees the pit bull come racing through the door, knocks open the screen, flies across the front yard. This is in a cul-de-sac, kind of like a thermometer sort of shape. And we've got video from some of the other homeowners that just see this black blur. Now, my client is an elderly woman who scoops up her puppy and ends up just getting hammered by this big old pit bull who doesn't bite her, but does manage to yank on the leash, excuse me, and fracture her wrist.
Wow.
And so we go, well, he didn't bite her, so the statute doesn't necessarily impute liability automatically, but let's talk about the reasonableness. And then we look and we figure out, why was the door ajar? Is there a history for this animal? And we start looking at other aspects and components that factor into the negligence. So ultimately, it comes down to figuring out what is the knowledge that this person has, not so much the behavior of the dog, because ultimately, to answer your question, the behavior of the dog isn't the problem. It's the behavior of the owner.
Thank you. That's the hardest to fix. So
well, it's also
even
hard for
if
me to get
Cujo
money from a dog.
breaks out a window, we still put the blame back on the owner.
Yes.
The owner's still liable.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then when we talk about the severity of the damage, that's when we can address whether or not this even can rise to the level of criminal. If you are in fact raising animals for fight, so if you're whether it's in a jurisdiction that permits it or otherwise, if you're doing the Michael Vick thing and that animal harms somebody,
right,
it's going to be as much as a felony, punishable for up to 3 to 10 years in prison if it should actually kill somebody. On a slightly lesser, it doesn't have to be trained.
What does that look like cost-wise? How much is that if it's not jail time, what is like your average, not average, but on a big scale, what does that look like when someone's having to pay out? I've got a couple clients that have been sued, and I work with that side, trying to get their dog to just be managed so they can never have it happen again. But you're on the other side of that. So what does the average person receive, or what is the lawsuit for?
So your average, actually, I think Maribel handles a lot of the insurance.
Or you have
has some information. What do you know about the payouts?
Tell them how much was actually paid out last year on dog attacks.
So in 2019, State Farm only, we paid $123 million in dog attack claims. The average in California is 52,164.
Wow.
Yeah. There was an article in the Orange County Register, this was back in 2014, where they identified Orange County as the dubious distinction of the dog bite capital of the nation. And it was just suggesting that the numerosity, and quite frankly, the reason that I brought up this topic the other day was, with the COVID situation being what it is, I've never seen so many dogs walking across in the front of my house or in the areas. I mean, I think, you had some information about the rescues and the.
Oh, there's no dog. There's no dogs left at the rescue. They're just,
oh, wow.
every breeder, every rescue, pretty much all the dogs have been homed somewhere. And us personally, our company in Sunset Beach, California, we've had 5 dogs over the last 3 or 4 weeks that have been rehomed again. So owner gets a dog for a couple of days and goes, oh, wow, this is not what I expected. And they're rehoming again. So a lot of new pet owners or owners that aren't aware. That was the purpose of asking you guys to come on board, because some people are really clueless. They bring a dog home, they don't have a bed or food or anything. So I think giving some information about insurance and thing would be really good for a lot. But we have a lot of questions. So let's see. My dog is 55 pounds and beautiful, but she has a ferocious bark, like a police dog type bark. So I have a question. It's twofold. If a friend is watching my dog while I'm out of town and my friend takes my dog out and my dog attacks, barks and lunges ferociously, or bites or scares, same scenario, but with non-dog walker. So just a friend of hers that comes over. I think this is Amy. That's who it is. She lives down the street and she has a friend that comes over when she goes out of town. And her friend is just a good friend of hers, stays at her house with her dog. And someone else had a very similar question. Let's see if it's kind of the same. What if a dog bites or causes injury to someone other than the dog walker while the walker has them out on a walk and the owner is not present? That's from Josh. And the other one was from Amy. Kind of the same question.
So the owner is always going to be liable for their animal.
Wow.
And that's going to be the rule. Now, if the owner should acquire a contractual agreement as between themselves and the dog walker, then they could try to impute liability on the dog walker. Likewise, the dog walker could have a liability waiver with the owner of the pet and say, look, if this critter gets crazy, it's on you, not me. And that's as to the dog bite. As to the dog attack, if the big scary dog comes up and frightens somebody and that person should fall, we get into a negligence standpoint. The handler is going to be what they're going to refer to them in California. The handler of the animal will step into the shoes of the owner, and most insurance companies will cover that as long as the handler is not otherwise employed. So if the handler is a company, if it's a professional dog walking company, then the insurance company might want to try and defer liability on them. But otherwise, the homeowner, or Maribel, you can perhaps talk about umbrella policies in a moment, but the homeowner's policy will likely cover the dog walker working for the individual. And then we look at what happened, because then we get into the negligence part. If you're just walking your dog, he's on leash, you're going down the street, and the dog barks, and somebody overreacts and rides their bicycle into a fire hydrant, you might still find yourself subject to a lawsuit, but you'll have some very good defenses, which are that there was no attack, there was no bite. And so for bite, by the way, we define it as an actual puncture of the skin. If you bite and you just get all pant, it doesn't necessarily count.
Oh,
I had
okay.
a client once that she was babysitting this little tyke at a park, and a yellow lab came running up because the baby was crying. So the baby was crying, the nanny scoops her up, and the dog lunges. And when it lunged, the nanny was a little old school. She had her sweater tied in a knot around her waist. And the dog mouth,
don't do that.
no, it was actually a good thing, because when the dog's mouth bit, he bit exactly on
The knot.
the knot, like a gag ball, put a tremendous bruise and injured her, but she didn't get bit per se.
Really, bruising doesn't enough for a bite?
It's not a bite by definition, but it is definitely enough to, and we sued and prevailed, and we ended up getting the nanny a fair amount of money in the case, because the injury doesn't have to be a bite. So if Cujo, or if the 55-pounder with a vicious bark causes somebody to fall off the curb and get harmed because it actually lunged, you may find yourself in trouble. If there's a history of it, you may find yourself in more trouble. If he was off leash, you're definitely going to find yourself in trouble. And so we look at different things. Now, by the way, there is an exception to the leash. In Huntington Beach, we've got a dog beach and a dog park. You are not going to be held strictly liable if your animal should attack in those areas, but you can still be negligent. So if your dog is the one, and anybody who's been to Dog Beach knows, there's that dog that runs up and just bites and bullies, and you get the proverbial one free bite as it relates to technically a non-bite when the dog causes harm. But after you're on notice, then you're in trouble.
Brendan Golia, I totally butchered your name, but he's a dog trainer that's out in Costa Mesa. And he asked, so a bite has to be a puncture? Good to know, but someone else wrote, good to know. I would argue with you there, because there's so many different levels of bite and people have different skin. So a dog that puts their mouth on me compared to someone in their 20s might have a different, it'll look different on me than it would someone else. So if I was fighting on the other end, I would say like a bruise is pretty much a bite. There's still teeth mark on the bruise. You know, I normally leave a few marks just because there's no puncture. So
I would disagree with the fact that it's going to hurt like hell. I'm going to totally agree with you on that. And I
definitely going down like with a feint.
Yeah. I mean, and the thing is, you're still going to be liable. It's just there's a benchmark for the code, which requires the bite, versus a basic negligence lawsuit, which will still put you in trouble financially. And it just, the burden on the plaintiff is now to show that the owner acted negligently and that it caused harm. Right. You skip a step with the strict liability.
Okay, so Brendan also asks, you talked about the exception of the leash thing at like a dog beach that's supposed to be dogs off leash, right? Or a dog park. They said, you know, no leashes in the dog park, in a fenced in dog park, right?
Right.
So what about the county land like the Newport River Jetty? It's basically a fake dog beach that they've put together. It is got a little fence. It's like a secret dog beach, but it's not labeled as a dog beach. So if a group of dogs are off leash and they do it themselves and it's like in their yard, is that where there's an exception, or because of the sign? Okay.
It requires a writing. It has to be a written posting of an exception to the leash law.
Oh, okay.
So interestingly, the jetty, I think the jetty is unincorporated anyway, so that would be a whole different thing. It's It's actually between Newport and Huntington, and I don't even know who owns that land, but in any event, it would have to be a writing. And so sans the written permission, you're going to be liable.
Okay, we got a lot of questions. We're going to keep going. I'm going to go to this one. At what point is so what happens to the dog after they've gone through a lawsuit? What exactly happens to the dog immediately once there has been a report of a dog bite? And then Joanna and Josh both asked something like, what point is euthanasia considered in a dog bite attack case? What behaviorist would be brought in, or bite interpretation by a qualified individual be reviewed?
Okay, so that is where your behaviorist may come in, because the answer is the first thing that happens after a dog bite. Again, let's just assume for purposes that includes a puncture. Well, the animal is going to be removed and it's going to be put on a 10-day quarantine. And before 3 months ago, that would have likely meant your animal would have been taken to the animal shelter and housed there for 10 days. But now things are wacky. It is discretionary to the animal control officer. They get to decide if you're going to keep the animal housebound, or if it goes to the animal control office. But in either event, the animal is going to be quarantined for 10 days. And the purposes are looking for rabies. In the event that the animal tests positive for rabies and shows signs, it is likely to be euthanized. So that's the basics for that's the fundamental step one, is that it's going to be a 10-day quarantine with the possibility of euthanasia for rabies. Now, if your animal bites more than once or causes a severe injury, and a severe injury is going to be
level 4,
it's going to require muscle perforation, and basically, if it's going to cause a couple different cosmetic surgeries, it's going to end up being at a sufficient level that it could require a single attack. Generally speaking, however, if you get 2 dog bites and not just attacks, or one what they would consider excessive attack, then the animal's going to end up getting taken to a process, and it's going to be county by county. And what happens is that you get a notice that you're about to have to defend your animal and discern if it's actually going to be a danger to society. And what we got to figure out is, what knowledge do you have about the animal's prior bites? What knowledge, what is the severity of these things? What were the circumstances? Is this animal being raised to actually be an attack dog? And is it being raised to fight? If your animal's being raised to fight, they're probably going to put it down and you're probably going to jail. If it's just something that bit twice, they're going to consider it. And that might be, and I'll be honest, I haven't had the opportunity, but that would be, I think, where a behaviorist would come in and explain the reasons why this happened. And if you can discern that it's not going to be a danger to society given certain steps, then that would be what would happen.
It's pretty hard to put a dog down. We dealt with a dog I think it was last year, and it had done 6 or 7 bites, and up to a level 5 bite with 110 stitches and all that. And they weren't going to put the dog down immediately. It took a lot of going to court and fighting for that. So it's good to know that even when something happens with your own dog, there's a long process before they actually say, that euthanasia is the best option. But hopefully that answers your question, Joanna and Josh. So this one's for you, Maribel. What's the average, let's see, what was the question? Okay. Very important to confirm there are no breed exclusions with the homeowner's insurance. Oh, live and learn. Okay. She was just commenting on what you said. Let's see.
depending on the insurance company. So with State Farm, there's no dog breed exclusions, but every insurance company is different. So not every insurance company covers every type of dog breed. It's State Farm specifically.
So what if my dog gets accused of attack, you pay out, am I still insured?
Yes, you'll still be insured.
Really?
Yes, if you're a longtime customer, you've been with us. If you're,
So me personally, not everybody.
If you obtain a policy after a year, we will keep you. If you're a brand new customer, first week your dog bites, we will cover, but at the year we're going to non-renew it. Yeah.
Okay.
But if you've been with us over a year, we will keep you. We do have other types of policies to protect yourself, which Mark mentioned briefly about an umbrella policy, which will cover you in $1 million increments above your homeowner's policy.
How much should you have in insurance? So like, we've got, okay, I'm just going to use you, Josh and Dana, just don't get upset. But like they live in an apartment complex. That dog is like, right when you go outside, there's a lot going on. There's kids running around. Like the likelihood of something happening would be for any dog, just because there's just so much going on in one little street. So for an apartment living, 2 people living in the same home, no kids, what would be a basic policy? Like how much would that cost per year for a renter? Or does it matter if you're renting or owning?
It is different from renting and owning, but the minimum policy with our renter's insurance, it'll cost you about $135 a year, and that will cover you up to $300,000. In excess to that, we do have an umbrella policy, which covers you up to $1 million. So
that's what I have.
Yes, and it's about $200 a year for 2 people, no accidents, no previous dog attacks or anything.
So does it cover everyone in the house? If your mother moves in and your brother and sister, so anyone
they would have to be listed on the policy, but there's no additional charge to list them as long as they're listed on the policy.
Okay. So if you've got teenage kids that are living at home right now, if they're on the policy and they're out walking your dog, everything's
teenage kids don't have to be listed, but if they're 21, 22, over 18, we would list them.
Wow, that's good to know. Good.
And to be certain you understand that what you're doing is protecting yourself in the event that your dog causes harm to someone else. And so that's where it gets tricky, because
that's just one of the benefits of the policy. There's many other benefits why you would have the renters
what's the
and
cheapest?
liability.
Like if you're on a budget, you just lost your job, but you have a dog that, it's not worth the risk. What's the, do you have
it's $12 a month.
So 60, what is that? I don't know.
It's about $130 a year.
Okay. And that covers any breed.
Correct. Any dog breed. We only have 2 questions, so we don't ask you what type of dog breed that you own. Our only question is if your dog has bit in the past 3 years and if your dog is trained to attack.
And if you have regular homeowners insurance, it's not guaranteed that they have a policy for your dog. This is an add-on.
This is included on State Farm, but some companies do have an add-on. Other companies do not cover. We had one of our customers about 5 years ago. I signed him up. He was with a different insurance company and he had a pit bull. Insurance companies will randomly go out and do an inspection, make sure the house isn't falling apart. If there's anything that the homeowner can fix to avoid a claim. And they peeked over the fence.
So you check the fencing and everything. Ooh, good to know if you guys have holes in your fence.
So they peeked over the fence and they noticed that our customer had a pit bull. So he came into my office with the letter from the other insurance company saying he was going to be canceled because he had a pit bull, or he can prove that he got rid of the pit bull to keep the policy. He was in tears, left my office in tears because that's his baby. He ended up obtaining insurance with us. He's still with us, very happy customer, and he was able to keep his dog.
Is that the insurance agent that has?
No, that's another. So we also insure insurance agents who have their name on the building because of their dog breeds. They love that we don't have a dog exclusion. So we insure a couple insurance agents for multiple companies.
And now so how I use Maribel with a lot of my clients is I tell hey, listen, if you're not sure, call Maribel. She will actually look at your policy that you currently have and tell you what you're covered for and whether you have enough coverage, right?
Right.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, there are riders, as Maribel mentioned. So for the non-State Farm folks, they do have, some of them will have a dog bite exclusion in the basic policy. You can pay extra money and get a rider, which will allow you to have a dog, but sometimes the rider has an exclusion as to specific breeds. So you got to make sure that if you have a rider and you've had it for a while, that it applies. You might have bought it when you had Lassie the Lab, and 10 years later, you got yourself a cute little pit bull, and now your pit bull is going to be excluded. So you're going to want to update and check your policy, because sometimes there's exclusions to the riders, which are in lieu of the exclusion.
Okay.
The amounts you said, by the way, animals are known to kill people. And so how much, excuse me, how much is a human life worth? So when I have a client who's lost their life because an animal bit them and took that life, there's a lot of insurance that's going to be needed for that case.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Josh asked, is that just for renters, or is that the same price for homeowners?
That's for renters. Homeowners is different because we have to cover the dwelling, and there's additional.
What's the
coverage.
average cost for a homeowner insurance? It always vary?
It always varies depending on the house, how much it is to cost to rebuild the home.
Okay. So, but can you just get dog insurance, like insurance that cover? No. Okay.
You might be onto something, Yolanda.
Okay. My friendly dog off leash, a 10-pound Chihuahua, was viciously bitten by a dog on leash, a 60-pound pit bull, on our public street. Does the owner of I asked you this yesterday. Does the owner on the on-leash pit bull have any liability? So we're talking about dog-on-dog attack. I knew we were going to get there.
So the answer would be, in this case, you could certainly bring an action. And up until recently, you could only sue for the cost of repair or replacement of your dog. It was, though the word is a chattel, it's a thing. And so until recently, if your dog was attacked, you could get the vet bills, you could get the funeral cost, or the cost of replacing. But they have changed the law within the last few years to allow for, if you watch your dog get mauled, you can actually bring an attack. I think Maribel previously mentioned that the one guy was crying because his pit bull's his baby. And my boys down here, if you hear us sneezing and it doesn't look like it's me, it's because Chewy's down here making noises. So, yeah, they're babies, they're family members, and there's an incredible amount of hurt and pain that goes when you see them get injured. So you could bring a lawsuit against the animal for harming your dog. However, if I was defending the pit bull on the leash versus any dog off of leash, your dog off of the leash is a code violation. And
Thanks for the warning.
there you go. So the code violation is going to put you in a very difficult position to prove that the guy with the dog on the leash was not negligent, or in any event more negligent than you.
What if the dog is on leash, but this has happened to me when Bentley was a puppy, and she was older and the dog was really heavy and she let go of the leash, but the dog's still on leash?
Just having the leash attached, you're no longer controlling. You have to be in control.
Okay.
So yeah, on leash and in control. So once that happens, you may not have violated the law. So you may not, there you go. You may not actually be subject to a violation, but you are going to be found likely negligent. If you can't control your animal, you're expected to be in control of it.
All right. Julie Fryman writes, dog to dog bite is first documented offense, report on file. Second documented offense, dog and person are evaluated by animal control. Third documented offense, dog in shelter, quarantine for 2 weeks. After 2 or 3 quarantine, depending on where you live, the dog is evaluated for euthanasia by animal control, behavior and medical team, and shelter staff.
And that's going to be county to county.
Every county is going to be a little
That's
different.
one of the things, is that it's going to vacillate from county to county. You can imagine some of the Northern California counties with a lesser amount of people and lesser fences and things of that nature. They may have different restrictions and different sort of opinions than us down here in Orange County and LA.
So anyone that's inquiring about what kind of insurance that they should have, I'm going to put Maribel's cell phone. She's amazing. Like literally she'll be at Disneyland and I'm like, yo, I got a question. And she will get on the phone with her little
Pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID, yeah, not anytime soon. And answer your questions. So that's what I like about her. She's just very hands-on. Marc has used Maribel. A lot of us use Maribel just to ask a simple question. So we are going to leave her name and phone number and her license number in this thread, and probably right underneath all of this once we sign out, so that you can just ask her any questions. And then same with Marc. And next month in June, we are going to have a dog topic, a workshop on dog bites, like how dog bite prevention. So it's mostly like learning body language and things like that. So we'll spin off from here and go into that next month. But we have a lot of other questions. So here's another one. I have a specific question. This happens early in the morning when I have my dog off leash on the beach. There is a person on the bike riding up and down the beach. I know who, okay. He comes up right behind us without any notification. I'm guessing I'm still liable, but what should I consider to do to protect myself?
So I'm assuming we're not on Dog Beach.
No, we're right here in Sunset.
All right, so we're not on Dog Beach, and I'm not familiar, but I don't think Sunset allows the animals to be off. So what happens is when you're trying to make a lawsuit, you got to take into consideration the liability of the different parties. If somebody comes up and startles and scares a dog, rings a horn, pokes it with a stick, grabs its tail, or does something of that nature, and the dog turns around and yips,
yeah,
then you're going to have a defense. Your fact that the dog was off leash is going to be weighed against you, but the negligence of the victim is going to be used as your defense. And so you're going to have to balance who was more right or who was more wrong in a case such as this. If it's determined that your animal was completely within your control and startled this person, then you might still have a good argument. If your dog bites him and he's off leash, you're going to have a twofold issue, because first of all, you got the strict liability we talked about. Also, you've got the fact that you violated a code violation. So you're going to have
I think the person that she's talking about probably has a bunch of stolen goods in a backpack. Does that matter? Because it's like at 3 in the morning. She walks really, really early.
Right. You still can't bite the homeless.
Okay.
Work.
Just asking.
You might just get fortunate. They're probably less likely to hire a lawyer.
All right. What if a maintenance person enters the property when you are not home without permission? This is a good one. And the dog bites or attacks that maintenance person. This is from people that are renting their place. And that can very much happen, as someone can, this is a rental property, so my landlord could come in, but I have a big sign that says, dog is on premises, please text first. Josh, that's what you should put on your door.
Well, here's the thing. The dog on premises thing in and of itself seems probably benign. If you say caution, beware of dog, you're suggesting that you have knowledge the dog could harm somebody. And you've now sort of moved yourself closer to liability.
Really?
When you acknowledge it is a.
That makes no sense to me.
Well, here's the thing, because the dog bite rules are that if you believe your animal can cause somebody harm, you need to actually take an extra step to prevent it from harming somebody. Here's the thing. If it is a trespasser, the dog bite statute very specifically requires somebody to be lawfully permitted on your property. So if they're a trespasser, and you would have to figure out if the maintenance man without authority is trespassing, or do you actually have a contractual agreement that you wrote in your rental agreement that said upon reasonable notice you will be able to he's entitled to enter. And so we got to figure out, was he entitled to be there? But you also raise a good point, which is the rental aspect of it, because the liability can also be imputed on the owner. And so commercial property owners and those that would own a property and rent to other people can also be liable.
Really?
And I work with a lot of our customers that own rental properties. They make sure they have a renter's insurance policy with high limits to make sure if they have a dog and their dog attacks or bites somebody, the owner of the property is protected as well.
Oh, that's right. You have to get that. Oh, okay.
Now, what you want to do is if you own a dog, you got to make sure that
The dog is covered.
if you know that it bit anybody or whatnot, you got to get it out of there, because the owners are allowed one free bite. And the owners of the property, if it's the owner
What
of
does
the
that mean,
property.
one free bite? One free bite before you're sued, or like?
Okay, perfect question. So in some states, your dog can do anything, and until it bites somebody, you're not basically liable, because you're always going to say, I never knew he was going to do that. He's never done that before. It's not him. So you get that one.
Stars match perfectly.
You get one free bite in many jurisdictions, and California had that until the early 40s. But they have obviated that by statute, which says that the owner, that's that strict liability thing we talked about. You are strictly liable. The free bite is essentially notice. I didn't know my dog would harm anybody, and now I know, and well, that kind of sucks for you, but I get off scot-free until the next time. Well, no longer is that the rule.
Okay.
So that rule still applies to owners of property. And they can say, look, I didn't know that Maribel's dog would attack or was vicious or whatnot. And they can be, liability can be, they can avoid liability one time. However, if it happens multiple times, or if there's any other reports of animal attacks, doesn't have to be bites, then we can put the property owner on notice. And so for purposes of what's it worth, when I get somebody that gets mauled and they've got facial scarring, and for the rest of their life they get to go around with a baseball looking scar because part of their mandible was removed, they're not going to be able to be compensated by somebody who's working at the, who's flipping burgers at McDonald's. But this person still is suffering. We look to the owner of the property if there's any liability in that respect.
Oh, wow. So beyond the dog owner. And so can the person that owns the property, what would happen at that point? So if you own a home and you've got someone renting from you, like me, I'm renting and I have a dog and my dog does something, and now the owner of the property can also be liable. Can they kick me out because of something like this?
They can and they should.
And that's where we get a lot of people that are like, I have to get rid of my dog, right?
And I work with property managers that have told their tenants, you have to obtain insurance and your dogs have to be covered or you can't live in the property.
Oh, wow.
Because you're not going to be able to waive that. So here's the thing. You might think, well, I could just get a contractual agreement where the tenant's going to agree to assume all liability, but that waiver is not going to work for me, the plaintiff, because I wasn't a party to that contract. You can basically, if there's enough money involved, you can make the renter legally agree to pay all the money that the owner would be liable for. But I'm still going to go after the owner. And, we're talking about real property, which is homes in California. Those usually have some value.
A lot different than other states. All right, here's a question from Joanna. What about a homeowner? How is a trespasser defined? What if, as a homeowner, one of my family members that lives in my home invites someone over without my permission from the homeowner and their guest gets bitten or attacked? And that could very well happen in your home, Joanna.
If your family member is an invitee, then all of their invitees are going to be subject to. So if Princess throws a rager when I'm away for a weekend and somebody gets harmed,
meaning your daughter.
Princess being the 16-year-old, and if anybody knows of her throwing a rager, you call me immediately.
Huntington Beach.
Yeah. So in the event that my daughter should throw a party with uninvited guests and they're harmed at my home, then, and it's because of my dog or otherwise, then I, the homeowner, am liable. So I don't have to personally invite them. I don't even have to want them there.
So the money that comes from being sued would come from you and your income. Would that fall back on her and she would be garnished wages for the rest of her life? Does it come back to the person that's handling the situation?
So So in order to get to that point, you go through the entire process. Traditionally, the insurance has either tendered the policy limits, which goes to the question you had before, and they say, here's 15, 50, 150,000. I say nowhere near enough. We have to finish this. We go through trial, we get a judgment. The judgment is going to be as against the parties that were sued, and it would include the owner of the property as well as the person handling the animal. It's going to be what they're called a joint and several liability. And what that means is everybody I sue owes me the whole amount until it's satisfied. So
Wow.
if Princess needs to go flip burgers double time to try and cover it, then that's what it's going to be. But it's everybody who's involved owes an equal amount until it's
What's
resolved.
the biggest payout that you?
I was just gonna go there. So we had one of our customers, before he was our customer, his dog attacked somebody and he was sued for 300,000. Well, his insurance company policy limit was only 100,000. So he was with State Farm, not our office, but State Farm gladly paid the 100,000, but he was still responsible for the other 200,000.
Wow.
Which he had assets, took, refined one of his houses, pulled out 200,000 to pay off the claim. But then 3 years later, he was eligible for an umbrella policy, which gave him $1 million in liability. So if he would have had an umbrella policy with $1 million liability, the umbrella
Wow.
policy would have been in excess to his homeowner's policy.
And what
It's
about
a range
you?
on price for umbrella.
For 2 people, no tickets or accidents, 2 vehicles, about $200 a year
Wow, is that it?
for $1 million.
$1 million for $200 a year for an umbrella policy, and that's if you are a renter or a homeowner.
Correct. This is in excess of.
Okay.
And that applies to any injuries that you could cause.
Correct.
So you're in a car wreck and you disable a family of 4, you're going to be covered for that umbrella as much as if your dog hurt somebody. So
Correct.
Someone wrote, so for landlords, they are not held on bite strict liability standards. Does that question make sense?
It does, and that's correct. The answer is the landlords are not strictly liable. The
Okay.
landlords are going to ultimately, if there's a liability, it's going to be because of their knowledge. Now, you can extrapolate that knowledge and their liability to some different things. I had a client that was up in Northern California, and we ended up suing the Circle K because the manager of the Circle K had a dog that she would bring and just allowed a free roam. The free roaming dog ended up hooking up with a bunch of thug dogs, and they were just like,
Oh yeah.
they were cruising past, and they ended
their
up,
own little gang.
they were my client was just getting in her car after having gotten whatever, some
Eyebrows done or something.
No, she was the Circle K. So she was actually, she had gone in there and was using whatever, got a squishy. But as she's going to the car, this thing snuck up on her, grabbed her by the back of the leg, and ended up tearing her Achilles as it yanked her away from her vehicle. She managed to kick it in the snoot and climb into her car and close the door. And they were just, all these dogs were circling around her. And through a lot of investigation and research, we were able to determine, because then the dog scampered. So we had to find the dog, find the owner, determine that the owner was the manager, learn that the manager, in fact, let her dog run free. Circle K was on the hook for it.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
So your employees, if you see Chewy running around here.
Oh, you're at the office.
I am at the office.
Oh, okay.
So if you let if you have animals at your office and your animals harm somebody, there could be some liability. But circling back to the question, the strict liability requires that notice.
Okay.
So
There's a question about, does it work with the same in the HOA community?
an HOA is likely not going to be responsible because of their duties. Their duties are simply to maintain the common areas and the exterior. They do set up rules and regulations, and they are responsible for abiding by those, but it would be the property owner within the HOA. So the HOA, you're not going to be able to sue,
Okay.
but the property owner within that.
Okay. There's a question about a cat.
Ah,
All right. This applies to all animals, right? Is there a...
it does not.
Oh.
It does not. So it's a very specific, there are other statutes that are written for, mostly for cows and bulls and things of that nature. Cats have been able to kind of roll under the radar, but they do have, the cats are actually subject to the one bite rule. So if the cat should bite somebody, you're going to be on notice that that animal is now has a propensity to violence. It's a vicious animal. So if the cat bites somebody and you can prove that you knew it was vicious, then you can bring a lawsuit as against the cat owner. Ultimately, when I sue people, the damages are going to be germane to the physical harm. So the reason cats have been able to sneak by so long is they probably haven't hurt anybody too terribly bad, and the scratching kind of things, you know, a lot of times you say, well, why'd you put your face in there? And then the cat goes like that. So, you know, cats, I don't like cats, by the way. I'm sorry.
On-leash dog attacking an outdoor cat. So there's another question on a dog on cat attack. Do you ever sue anyone? Have you ever been in a case where you've got one owner of a dog suing another owner of a dog because of the attack between the two dogs or two animals?
Absolutely. So hypothetically, if I'm walking down the street holding my cat, or some people might have a cat on a leash.
This cat is completely off leash. It's an outdoor cat. And the dog was on leash, attacked an outdoor cat, which is a natural dog thing. Squirrels, possums, cats.
At that point,
the cat's off leash, right?
Well, the most you could get, it would be the damage to the cat, and you probably would be responsible for paying for the repairs to the cat. But it's nothing that I've ever dealt with, and it's nothing that I probably would deal with unless it was like a really, really fancy cat. Because primarily for me, it's about the injuries to the human beings.
Okay.
I do certainly care and I care of cats. I don't want cats to get mauled, and I care more if dogs get hurt because I love my pooch. But for me, it's about the damage to the human.
Okay. Is there any cases where someone's suing over an attack of a dog, that their dog?
Yes. And so, I mean, certainly dogs are expensive, and veterinarian bills are really expensive.
But you've worked on a case where they've actually won and they've got their coverage of their vet bills? Because you have to prove all that, right? If both dogs are on leash and.
Well, in the, I mean, so your hypothetical is going to have to, you know, you got to figure out if they were both on leash, do we have any kind of third party witnesses? Because both people are going to say, my dog didn't do nothing and that thing attacked. I mean, that's going to be the story every time.
The little dog was the instigator and the big dog attacked, you know.
And actually, most of the time, them little dogs are chewing on big dog ears and stuff. But you're going to need somebody who can establish, and, you know, basically got to figure out the whodunit first. And so the whodunit is circling back to the strict liability part. When it bites a human, we don't even have to worry about whodunit. We know as long as we can identify the dog, we don't have to worry about the why.
Oh.
If we're talking about dog on dog, then the why may be more germane, because if your dog on a leash came into my yard and my dog was allowed, the animal versus animal may not necessarily amount to anything. On the other hand, we're walking down the street and I lose control and my dog runs over and attacks your dog, then I'm going to be liable for the damage my dog does to your dog. If when my dog is running at you, you lunge backwards, which has been known to happen.
If you fall backwards because of the dog attack, you said?
Yeah, I've had clients that have broken ankle,
wrist.
I mean, you get this, you get the swoop with a ball in the open hand, and at that point, again, it doesn't require the bite. That constitutes an animal attack, and if that animal had a reasonable, if you had a reasonable fear and apprehension, then your reaction is going to be deemed reasonable. And if that person was unreasonable in how they were handling the dog, that's what leads to it. Again, that kind of goes back to our prior 50-pound with the police dog bark. If he's just walking down the street barking, it may not, it shouldn't be negligence on the part of the dog owner. If he's walking down the street barking and coming at you, now we got a different thing.
Okay, we've got a few more good questions. So Maribel Vasquez, to place, start insurance, or does it require 30 days to begin? Which is a great question. And can a renter have an umbrella policy? And is there a background check to get an umbrella policy? That's 3 questions.
Okay, so the first question, we do not require a 30-day wait period. We can start your insurance at any time. The next question, a renter definitely can have an umbrella policy. They do qualify for it as well. And the background check, we check loss history for 3 years as long as there hasn't been any type of open bodily injury claim paid out.
So there would be a claim from an insurance claim, right?
Correct.
So you don't, I asked you this. Oh, this is a good question. So let's say you have your neighbor, your dog attacked your neighbor's kid that came over, and you guys, like, you know, squared it away and it's all covered, or even you guys called animal control and it's on, you know, it is of record. And then you lie to State Farm and go, absolutely not. No, my dog has never, ever done that. And so you'll be approved, right?
Correct. But then our attorneys are then going to go look into if you were honest on the application to us.
Right. So if you'll go through, you'll have insurance until you need it, right? And then you guys will come to find out if that is after you're doing your check. What will happen if you find out that there was some kind of attack early on and they lied?
It can be declined.
It can. Okay.
And the declination can occur after the lawsuit, and likely would occur after the lawsuit has been filed. Because again, you're not likely, I've had cases where this has certainly occurred, and the dog owner is not likely to cop clean, like, oh, by the way, you remember when I told you I needed this insurance? I lied. But that ain't gonna happen. So when we do our investigations and we find out that there was prior incidents, and then we look at the application, which we can get, and it says no prior incidents, and State Farm, and quite frankly, it's the last thing that your plaintiff attorney wants. The last thing I want is to find out that I don't have an insurance policy to try and pay for this damage. But they will definitely and should yank the coverage, and that means your lawyer as well is going to go.
Wow. All right. Brendan has a good question. What if you're holding your pet, or pet is on leash next to you, someone reaches out and pets your animal and gets bit, which this happens so many times. They come out with their hand and they're just like, can I pet your dog? So you were not asked beforehand to pet the animal. I've heard this doesn't matter. Your thoughts? And then we're adding on to that. What if the dog has a sign and a vest that says, do not pet?
So,
I mean, they're going through a lot to tell you not to pet the dog. I even have like a shirt that says, get away from me, or something like, stand back.
and I would be like, oh, look at the cute doggy vest. Come here, let me see the cute little guy. So the strict liability is just that. It is strict, and it imputes liability, which just simply says that the plaintiff has established their burden of proving that the dog bite happened and there was negligence. The comparative or contributory negligence of the victim is what can offset that. So the reaching out, we would have to say, well, was it aggressive or was it simply reaching out? Because the answer is, if you're walking carrying your dog, or your dog's on leash, and I walk by, and I mean, this happens 1,000 times on the boardwalk behind you, where dogs are walking, we're in close proximity, probably not within 6 feet, but close. And as the dog comes by, my hand's down there and I pet the dog's snoot and he bites me. That's on the dog owner. And
Really?
I don't need to ask permission to pet your dog. If your dog is in public and it's close enough to me where I can actually reach down and get bit, it's on you.
Well, what
If
if you put your fingers in some kid's mouth and they bite you? Is it the same? Like, who does that?
I'd rather get bit by a dog than a kid. Let me just put that out there right now. It's it's a very overriding law that's written in the public interest to try and take the 99.9 percentile into consideration. There will always be outliers. There's going to be the guy walking down the street with a bacon suit and wonder, gee, why the dogs come running up on me? And I mean, those things are going to happen. You do have the ability to try and diminish your liability based on
putting a sign on them, and you're like covered in bubble wrap, like stay back and everything, and they still, just because you're on the road, you are now putting yourself in a position where that they can be liable because you're there.
It just requires the bite. It just requires the owner, the bite, and the permission of the people to be there, which is to say, not a trespasser.
So if you have a dog that's growling, so here's a question. My dog is on leash and someone's dog suddenly runs towards me and my dog is growling, snarling, and I am afraid of a bite and I injure the oncoming dog. Is that a problem for me?
No.
Okay.
You're going to be able to be excused if you've got a reasonable, it comes down to a reasonable reaction.
Okay. Wow. It's a lot of information.
It's gonna be like the bearer of bad news, Sarah is telling you. Jammed.
What's the biggest case that you've worked on where, I mean, how long does this take when you're suing someone and
So we had a case that was in excess of $1 million, and the time frame was extraordinary because we had to do a lot of depositions and investigation and research. The fact scenario was really convoluted, where the owner of the dog, her dog had bitten and killed a cat. And then actually, I think it had bitten and killed 3 cats within several months prior to the incident. Because of this, and because it had actually ran after aggressively some neighbors, the department had come out and they're looking to get the dog. The owner of the dog took it and gave it to mom, so that the dog would not be found by the department, not because she was trying to protect anybody and not because she was trying to do the right thing. She was trying to keep the dog and herself from getting identified so she wouldn't get in trouble with the department. So my client was her roommate, and when she came home, the dog was gone. Everything's fine. At some point later, it was a couple weeks later, she came home. Dog is still, to her knowledge, not there. And then she hears in the background just this vicious snarling, and she goes to see the dog owner. Her roommate's boyfriend is in the backyard being mutilated by this vicious animal. He had bites on the neck, which would appear to be going for the carotid. He had them on the ribs, and he got them on the leg, and of course on the arms where you're trying to defend yourself. She went in the house and got some pans.
Wow.
She came out with some pans and was able to make noise and hit the dog so that it stopped latching on this guy. But of course, then it turns on her. So it's coming after her. She got bit on both arms, and then as she was stumbling backwards, it ended up biting her on the leg, severing the femoral artery, which is pretty much all your blood from your lower extremities. She was able to climb herself into a bathroom and kick the door shut as the animal continued to circle. She said she thought it was like Jaws, just circling, waiting outside the door. She was fortunate that she had her phone with her and was able to call 911. And as she was passing out, they got there. She didn't bleed out and die, but she was severely injured and mauled, as was the individual in the back. The owner, of course, is liable, but she was just technically renting the property which was owned by her parents. And then her parents had put the property in a trust, the trust which was actually benefiting the property back to the dog owner. So we had to do a whole title trace as well as a whole investigation on the parents. We had to interview the animal control people in the area so we could talk about those previous dog bites, speak to the victim in the backyard who was no longer boyfriend at some point. And
I assume they're no longer roommates either, right?
No, she got out of there. And that one took years to finally resolve.
And what was the end solution? What was the price tag on all of that?
It was in excess of $1 million.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It-
Did
she
the
really-
owner have enough to cover that? Did the owner of the dog end up like just dissolving everything in the trust?
The insurance and the owner and the girl, everybody had to make a contribution.
Yeah. Wow. That's just,
So it was lengthy and expensive.
yeah, that's a hard thing to even mentally go through. I can't even imagine.
Imagine.
No.
Yeah, the pictures were otherworldly.
All right. Well, it's almost, I got a couple more questions and I think we'll shut it down. And there's enough blood stories for
Sorry
the
about
day.
that. War stories.
I'm going to have to drink early from this.
It's Friday.
Friday. Yeah. So are you aware of any legislative efforts to change the strict liability law in California? In your opinion, good one, Joanna. In your opinion, is this something that may change to mirror other states with more flexible laws?
So
Love her questions. They're really good. She's a
The,
top fan, by the way.
like I said, Orange County was identified as the dog bite capital of the nation. And there are about 1 million dog bites a year. And California does have the highest percentage of dog bites. I don't expect that. So I'm not aware of any current legislation to alter it. And nor do I expect that there would be, based on the statistics, which are that I think they said statistically on half of the kids under the age of 12 have had like a dog bite or a dog attack. And so I don't expect that they would change it. It is an incredibly high standard. But being liable is only the first part. Your dog goes out and bites somebody. If your dog didn't really harm them, if your dog, I had a case where a canine came flying out of a unit,
Oh, that happened.
police dog,
Yeah.
and it attacked my client, but it only barely scratched her. And for about $15,000, that case was resolved.
I don't know
And
if a
so,
dog came out of a police car running towards me, I'd probably hit my head from falling down, right? Because they're so athletic and fast.
yeah, all she did was manage to turn. She was able to turn, and it hit her in the back and it knocked her down. So just because your dog bites somebody doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to cause $1 million in damage. And so the strict liability is just as to responsibility. The damages are going to be germane to medical bills, loss of earnings, loss of life, perhaps, disfigurement. If you've got, the humiliation of a scar on your face, if you're depressed and more. I've had a client that was a model that had her leg mauled up, so she lost her ability to do modeling gigs.
Wow.
So those all factor into what it's worth. But I mean, if your dog's really not hurting anybody, then even though you're liable, it's going to be kind of a tree falls in the forest. So I'm in favor of it.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's go ahead and wrap it up. I want to say thank you so much, Mark. We've got a few people on here that we're going to send your contact information. So if you have any specific questions regarding you and yourself or your family or someone you know, Marc Ellis from Ellis Law Firm is your guy, and we will put in his information. And Maribel, thank you so much for being here. She is an amazing insurance agent. And if you're not with State Farm and you're with anyone else, like I was with, who was I with? The AAA. And I'm like, just look at my policy and tell me. She'll just genuinely just look and see if you're covered and make sure that you're covered so that you don't go through some of the cases that Mark is going to get you for. All right, guys. That's why training qualified individuals is so important. Yeah, and if you have questions about dog training, I am Yo again from Canine Learning Academy, and we are doing one-to-one strategy calls for free on our Facebook page. You can book now, and we will sit down and talk to you about some problems that you're having. If you just want hey, I need a little help, that's what we're here for. So Thank you guys again for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. I think this
Thank
was
you.
very helpful. We've got a lot of people saying thank you. This was very helpful. Anthony Miller's watching, Susie, Selena, Dana, Joanna. So thank you guys very much. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Happy
Thanks,
Friday.
Happy Friday. Take care.
Bye.